You'll have to forgive me a little bit today. I'm at Oklahoma Youth Expo, working a little bit remotely today, trying to help support the show here. And so I'll be outside. So I hope my audio is okay, but looking forward to Dr. Lalman's discussion today.
Thank you very much. Before we kick into our presentation, I wanted to uh, point out that this is the first in an excellent series for Ranchers Lunchtime webinar. It's the Tug-of-War in the cattle industry. Today we have, as you know, Dr. Lalman's going to present talking about cow size and finding forage-efficient cattle. We're going to go from that into how cow size and post-weaning management affects carcass weights and how that leads to other segments of the industry and the growth and efficiency in the cattle as they leave our ranches. Then we're going to have some some really special guests. Dr. Marshall Streeter from Merck Animal Health is going to talk a lot about their analysis on carcass weights and how that continuing trend will go forward. And then Dr. Bob Weber from Kansas State Cooperative Extension talking about selecting cow herds for low cost, highly productive cows that also result in high quality carcasses. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lalman for our inaugural talk on this series, Beyond Cow Size, Finding Forage Efficient Cattle. So, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Beck. I don't like to use these headsets, but I know the sound quality will be better for you all if I do. So I'm going to do that today. How are we looking there, Dr. Beck?
There you go. You've got.
Does that look okay?
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to kind of give you an update on what we have been doing here at OSU. The idea of tug-of-war, which I should have thought to put a scene of of tug-of-war right at the beginning of this, but Dr. Beck will give you that job for next time around. And by the way, his presentation for next week is very cool. I got to see a preview of that here this last week, and Dr. Beck has got some really neat stuff relative to the change in carcass weights in cows over time and finished carcass weights and how those relate to cow size and carcass performance. And then he's got a bunch of information relative to other management strategies that influence carcass weights in the cattle industry. So anyway, as we get started here, I'm going to start off with a little bit of perspective, and as we'll learn a lot more about as we go through this series. Carcass weight has increased a lot over the years, and it's expected to continue to increase. One thing that really sticks in my mind, I heard Dr. Glenn Dolezal say at a program we attended last fall that the big packing plants can process a 1,000-pound carcass at the same chain speed they can process a 600-pound carcass. And so, of course, it's much more efficient for them for the carcass weights to be heavier. And so, that's just one of many factors that influence this in our industry. And so we'll hear a lot more about that as time goes by. But so why that's important for the cow-calf producer? Well, I'm gonna start here at kind of ground zero on the cow side of the equation, and we'll talk about the influence of cow weight on feed intake. But certainly there's a strong genetic correlation between cow weight and carcass weight, 0.6 to around 0.8 in the literature. Cow weight in a lot of ways is simply used as a proxy to estimate feed costs and stocking rate. Obviously, it does have a direct impact on cull cow income, and with today's prices for cull cows, that's really important. I mean, it's always important, but even has a bigger impact today with, you know, $1.60 to $1.75 cow prices. The heritability of cow weight is moderate to high. And so, as it turns out, it's something that's relatively, and emphasize that relatively, simple to change. Simple to increase cow weight, simple to, well, I don't know about simple, but certainly you can have an effective program or breeding objective to control cow weight due to that moderate to high heritability in that trait. The other interesting thing, though, that's I think we need to keep in perspective is that the cow-calf phase accounts for a very large portion of the total feed required to produce 1 pound of carcass weight. And of course, we're including forage consumption when we make that statement. But I don't think a lot of people realize that, you know, that much or that high of a proportion of the feed required to produce beef comes from forage production, forage consumption, utilization by the beef cattle herd. Another thing I'd like to mention here before we continue is that, you know, we need to keep in perspective, I think, one thing we'll hear more about again later in this series is, you know, the premiums that are available post-weaning, in the post-weaning phase of the industry. And I just want you to recognize that there's no relationship relative to carcass quality in terms of marbling score between mature cow weight and marbling, and no relationship between growth in general and marbling. And so, you know, I'm just trying to make the point that we don't have to select for growth to take advantage of those quality grade premiums. As you can see in this graph I've got here, showing several hundred proven Angus sires that produce daughters, you know, their expected progeny difference for mature cow weight there on the x-axis and marbling EPD on the y. And you can see it looks like someone nailed that with a shotgun. There's just no relationship there. Okay, so, but because of the continued increase in cow weights over time and this tug of war, meaning the concern about increasing cow cost in that phase of the industry and the need for heavier carcasses in beef production post weaning, we got interested in studying this more, and we've had the good fortune to be able to expand our research capacity here at Oklahoma State, using or developing that forage intake system you saw there on that little video. And so we've been studying forage intake in cows now for several years. And the first thing I want to start off with today here is let's just take a quick look at the relationship between cow weight and expected increase in dry matter intake as cow weights ratchet up. And so we've got several studies we've conducted here now. All of these have been conducted there in that facility that you saw there just a minute ago. But a range of relationship of anywhere from 1.4 to 3.4 pounds of increased forage intake per 100 pounds increase in cow weight. The average in all those experiments has been about 2.25. What I'm going to rely on most here in the next information I'm going to show you is this Gross paper. That's Megan Gross's paper that she published in 2024. And that indicated that that is a literature review and kind of a meta-analysis on feed intake in beef cows. And that paper indicated that relationship was about 2 pounds increase in forage intake for each 100 pounds of increased cow weight. Okay, so then Megan, with the same literature review or meta-analysis she conducted, developed a new equation for cow intake. We just published this paper in 2024. And we also evaluated the current equation that's published in the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and is used kind of behind the scenes to predict cow weight in a lot of nutritional software programs. And so I just wanted to show you what Megan discovered relative to her more current data and this old equation. Old meaning the National Academy published this first. The black line here you see in the diamonds published this equation first in 1996. The most recent update of that was in 2016. But they're still using that same equation in this version, the most current version of that publication, which winds up being basically the Bible for beef cattle nutrition. Okay, and then Megan's newer equation here is shown in the red dots on this graph. One thing I didn't mention that's important to note is that the data from the 96 equation here, those experiments were conducted in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Megan restricted her data to develop this new equation from 2000 to 2020 is basically the range of years that we used, and so it's more current data than used previously. This equation is for lactating cows, and it shows you the response to feed intake across a range in diet quality. TDN is total digestible nutrients, of course, an indication of forage digestibility or energy content. And what we discovered basically, if you assume that 60% TDN is pretty close to an annual average diet quality for a grazing beef cow, then what we discovered is that the old equation was basically underestimating a lactating cow's feed intake by about 6 pounds per day. Now, if the diet quality was low, that old equation, you can barely see it there behind those circles, but the old equation was actually doing a reasonably good job. But the higher the energy value of the diet, the higher the digestibility of the forage, the more their intake was underestimated. Okay, and so then we used Megan's equation to kind of develop this relationship. And what we did is we assumed a 10,000 acre central Oklahoma ranch. I think we assumed this ranch would be with tallgrass prairie forage would be producing around 3,500 pounds of forage per year, and that we were utilizing a 28% harvest efficiency when we made these calculations. And so if you had, using Megan's equation, and we applied it to estimate year-round forage intake with very little hay supplementation, if you had 1,000-pound cows on this 10,000 acre ranch, you should be running about 868 cows to achieve that 28% harvest efficiency, or just put moderate to even slightly on the light side of grazing pressure on that place. And then if you had 1,500-pound cows, you should be running only 644 females to put the exact same grazing pressure on that operation. So that's how that equation works. You know, if we something maybe a little more practical would be this comparison of 1,100 to 1,300 pound cows, and you can see there that there's nearly 100. What is that? 94 fewer cows should be stocked on that place to achieve the same grazing pressure. And again, all we're doing here is using cow weight as a proxy to estimate forage intake. I think we can do better, and we'll get to that here in just a few minutes. The other thing I think it's really important when we're talking about cow efficiency and forage utilization efficiency is to recognize that some of this is going on in our industry, and we've got considerable amount of evidence that this environmental limitation is occurring in the cattle industry. But it appears that the genetic potential in many cases is not the limitation for at least weaning weight growth in many beef cattle operations, but it is the actual ranch environment that is limiting that growth. I'm trying to make sure you all are, Dr. Beck, make sure I'm not, I don't think you all can see that, but I want to make sure it's not in the audience's view. It's okay, Dr. Biggs? Yeah.
Yes, you're
Yes,
good.
sir.
All right. So you can see that this is the phenotypic data from the Angus Association for Weaned Bull Calves and for the Charolais Association also for weaned bull calves, their phenotypic trend over time. And I just want you to recognize that, you know, those weights have essentially stabilized as time has gone by. And I hadn't, until just a few years ago, I hadn't really looked at it this way, but was surprised that this is going on. And of course, once those commercial calves get to the feed yard and we take the lid off the environment, in other words, have a high quality diet available to those calves 24/7, those calves are just going to explode in terms of growth. But in many cases, it does appear that the ranch environment is kind of restricting the weaning weight. And we've got a lot more data to indicate that. And it seems particularly maybe more frequent occurrence in the north central and mountain west region of the country. But anyway, I think maybe the important thing here is not that this is what's going on from a national average standpoint, but what's going on at your place. And this is relatively easy to track over time. And if you could create your own graph, sort of like this, I think, it'd be a really good way for you to consider if that's going on. But, if cow weights are increasing and your weaning weight is not, and if you have a sell it weaning, kind of business structure, then what you've got is a more expensive factory that's producing no more widgets. And so it's just important to know if that applies in your case or not, and whether or not you should shift your breeding objectives to focus more on controlling cow costs and perhaps less in that case, or in those cases, focus less on continuing to select for more growth. Okay, so there's kind of my my summary for this part of the presentation. Those stocking rates need to be adjusted according to current average mature cow weight, and with the technology we have available today, even sales receipts of culled cows, most producers can kind of get a pretty good estimate of what those culled cow weights are, or their active cow weights are. Okay, so let's just dive into this a little bit more in terms of that response of feed intake. Here you see several, I'm sorry, response in terms of calf weaning weight relative to cow weight. And what I've got here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different sources of information on that question. And so you see a range in the top, those top 5 studies there, a range of 4 pounds of additional calf weaning weight per 100 pounds of cow weight, up to 15 pounds. And Gadberry was an Arkansas study. The Ziegler 2020 was a Nebraska study. Burr and Sadowski are both Oklahoma State experiments from cow herds here in the state of Oklahoma. And then we analyzed, Kaylin Stearns helped me analyze some of the King Ranch data up to 2024, and we discovered their response was about 4 pounds of additional weaning weight for each 100 pounds of additional cow weight. Okay, so I'm going to use some of those values and we're going to develop an enterprise budget to estimate what the profitability of a set of cows that differ in mature weight by about 200 pounds. And here's a real quick summary of that enterprise analysis. So we started with 1,150 pound cows, and we compared that to 1,350 pound mature cow weight. In this analysis, we used a 10 pounds per 100 pounds of cow weight estimate increase in weaning weight. So we are getting, in this estimation, we are getting some restriction, I guess you would say, from the environment. And so we've got 200 pounds of cow weight. So we multiplied 10 pounds by 2. And so therefore we've got 531 pound calf weaning weight. Annual cow cost using Megan Gross's newer intake equation estimates that the annual cow costs and forage cost down here in this row would go up by about $50 per year. Cow costs go up altogether by about $65 per year due to that additional 200 pound cow weight increase. That doesn't sound too bad. But the thing is that we have a restricted land base here. We also calculated this enterprise based on 10,000 acre restricted land base. And so what you wind up with, of course, is a substantially lower stocking rate to achieve that moderate grazing pressure. And then you have to run 597 cows on this operation. And this was the forage productivity we assumed here was central western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Okay, and so substantially lower stocking rates or higher acres per cow than the previous scenario I mentioned. And then you see the difference in calf revenue, very substantial. Net return per $10,000 actually winds up differing by about $67,000 per year. So again, I just want to point out that if you just look at the difference in cow costs on a per animal basis, it doesn't look like all that big of an impact. But then if you consider that a producer that's going to continue to aggressively select for growth and increase cow size really has to make a choice. You're either going to be overgrazing your place if you don't make any change or have a real strict breeding plan to control the cow weight and cow costs, or you have to go get more land if you're not going to overgraze your place. And so I guess the third option, of course, then is to run fewer cows. And so that's how those scenarios differ. Or if you compare, per animal basis compared to a per acre basis or per restricted land base. So 372 calves would be marketed in that 1,350 pound cow system, assuming an 85% weaning rate, and we assumed a 15% heifer retention rate. That left us with that many calves to market. This big of a difference in the profitability between the more moderate sized cows and the bigger cows. And so you have to have about $180 premium for each calf sold in order to make up that difference. And so whether that premium comes at weaning or whether it comes at the end of the finishing period, that is about the amount of premium you would need to have in order to overcome the heavier cow weight and lower stocking rate. Okay, so there's kind of my summary on that bit, and that is, using cow size as a proxy. The moderate cows are more profitable, and I think most people are very familiar with that because these kind of analysis have been done for many years, and that's if you assume a sell at weaning business enterprise, then that's kind of how that comes out. And I'm a little concerned that perhaps the multi-trait selection indexes don't reveal that that level of difference in profitability because they basically have to be calculated on a per animal basis. Okay, now let's talk about post-weaning efficiency and talk a little bit about diet quality and whether or not the gains that the industry has made in terms of feed efficiency research and methods to select for feed efficiency has been benefiting the cow herd. So, most of these tools, these are all organizations that provide a tool to estimate, a genetic prediction tool for feed intake and or efficiency in beef cattle, but they're generated from growing cattle consuming a relatively high quality diet, like a bull test ration is what I'm thinking there. The challenge though is that the cow herd only really has a moderate to high quality diet. Well, we'll say a high quality diet in the spring of the year, basically. If they're relying primarily on grazing and not dry lotted through the winter or something and able to consume an alfalfa or alfalfa haylage type diet. And so our program is focused on finding cattle that thrive on the moderate to low quality forage. And that's what I think makes our program unique relative to a lot of the other beef cattle efficiency research that has occurred now for 25 to 30 years. And so the first question we started out by asking was, do animals rank the same for feed intake when they consume a strict forage diet compared to, let's say, a moderate quality diet, mixed forage and grain, sort of like a bull test ration? And so we did a series of experiments to evaluate that, again, using our new feed intake facility out there west of Stillwater here. And also we found 4 papers in the literature that did the same thing. And so what I want to show you here is all those studies, the class of cattle here in the middle column. And then these are R means correlation. And if there's a P beside that correlation, that means it's a phenotypic correlation. If there's a G, it's a genetic correlation. Notice there's only one G in all of these experiments. We need a bigger study to investigate this further. But this is a French paper actually where they evaluated intake of cows consuming hay or corn silage, well-eared corn silage, which, by the way, corn silage on a dry matter basis is nearly 50% concentrate. And so it's a good quality diet. So you can see there that in every case, and these are Amanda Holder's experiments with mature cows, and these are Dr. Emma Briggs' experiments with developing replacement heifers. And you can see that in every case, we get a positive and moderate and sometimes high phenotypic correlation between what the cattle consumed on the strict forage diet relative to what they would consume or how they would rank consuming that mixed kind of bull test type ration. And so we think because of that data, we think that the intake genetic tools available throughout the industry will be useful to control intake or appetite in a cow herd, even though they weren't developed for that purpose. It appears to me especially encouraging that one genetic correlation is relatively high, and these phenotypic correlations are moderate. Most of the time, when you go from a phenotypic to genetic correlation, now the geneticists watching today are welcome to straighten me out here, but most of the time it seems to me like when you get to the genetic correlation, it's substantially higher than the phenotypic correlation, just like you see here in the French study, which shows both of those correlations. So I'm encouraged that we can use those genetic tools already available in the breed associations to control appetite in the cow herd and use that to our advantage. So that's going to be one of my big take-home messages from today. And we've just learned this here over just the last few years here at OSU. Okay, now the other side of that story is how do animals rank for weight gain when consuming forage versus how they rank for weight gain when consuming that higher quality concentrate diet. And it's nowhere near the same result we saw when we were looking at the relationship for feed intake. In other words, basically, if you take the average of all these experiments, the relationship is zero. There appears to be no correlation um, between average daily gain on a forage diet versus a concentrate or higher quality diet, and that's a surprise as well. But I think that really points to a lot of opportunity and future possibilities, and actually some low-hanging fruit for our cow-calf segment of the industry. So let's talk about that here for just a bit. Okay, so I want to give props to the Bradley 3 Ranch. We have been working with them now for a couple of years on some of their really neat data that they have collected out there in the Texas Panhandle. And what they do is every year they test their bulls for grass gain for a period of time. And I apologize, I don't remember if it's an 80 or 90 day grass gain study, but somewhere in that range. And then they put those bulls on their very traditional or typical higher quality concentrate diet for the genetic evaluation for gain after they come off of this grazing test. This is this last summer's 2025 set of bulls results in terms of their bull test average daily gain down here on the x-axis, and their grazing average daily gain earlier in the year on the y-axis. And so once again, this suggests that there's very little relationship between those two performance measures. But why do I say there's maybe some low-hanging fruit or a lot of opportunity for the cow-calf segment of the industry? Well, it's because there are some cattle that every time we look at this, we find somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20, sometimes up to 25% of the animals that wind up in this top right quadrant, indicating that they actually are really good in terms of weight gain in both of those environments. And I think those are the cattle that we really need to be looking for and trying to identify as we select cattle for improved forage efficiency. And those cattle also have the genetic capacity to be really efficient and good gainers in the post-weaning phase of the industry. That's why I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's a relatively simple thing to solve, I think, because we have scales and we can weigh cattle. Take home here that mixed diet intake is related to forage intake. Those dry matter EPDs, in our opinion at this point, will work to control appetite in the cow herd. You know, the EPDs for growth, on the other hand, have a really big question mark there, and don't really think that we have probably made much progress in the cattle industry over the last 20 years or so in terms of improving cattle's ability to utilize forage, primarily because we haven't selected directly for that forage gain, which of course relates to the ability of a cow to gain body condition score and maintain her body condition score on a moderate or low quality diet without having to provide her with a lot of extra supplement. Okay, so what would be the strategy then for you to control cow costs or appetite in the cow herd? And so this would be my suggestion, and that is to combine the feed intake EPD and breeds that offer that genetic tool with the mature cow weight EPD. And these tools are both, of course, offered by the American Angus Association, and that's why I'm showing again, these are the same proven Angus bulls. And you can see there that there's a lot of variation, although there is kind of a weak relationship that as cow size, mature cow weight increases, there you can see that positive genetic correlation as feed intake goes up. However, what I would suggest if you have a high priority breeding objective to control appetite or stocking rate in your cow herd over time, I'm not going to try to tell you where to draw your square or rectangle, but there are a lot of sires here that are somewhere around breed average for feed intake, and really on both sides of that mature cow weight. But if you combine those tools and you select for sires that produce daughters that have moderate appetite and moderate mature weight, I think you have a really, really good chance of controlling cow cost over time. And then, take all the weight gain, post-weaning weight gain and carcass weight you can get while you're controlling cow costs. And so there's going to be some sires in that square that can do both of those pretty well. Okay, and so let's move on then and talk just a little bit about the low-hanging fruit or the opportunity that we have to make progress in terms of forage-efficient cattle. This is pretty simple. This is one of Bailey Thompson's contemporary groups. She tested 2 summers ago. This is just our replacement heifers, and she tested on strict grass hay and mineral. Total of about 90 days. We just used experimental period of about 70 days. But this is the feed intake and weight gain of those heifers on a straight hay diet. Now you can imagine, the average of the group weight gain is not going to be very impressive because that's all we're getting is grass hay. But there's some heifers in this contemporary group that I would consider have what I'd consider to be moderate intake and really exceptional weight gain on that forage diet. But in every contemporary group we test, just like you saw with the Bradley data, there's some heifers that basically are telling us they have no business becoming a cow because they cannot or do not perform well on that strict forage diet. And so, that just indicates that, there's a lot of opportunity, whether you want to select for the females, maybe keep a few more heifers than you need to retain and breed and test them for forage gain, and then only retain the heifers that can at least perform well on a moderate to low quality forage diet, and maybe eliminate or cull those heifers that prove to you that they don't have the capability of thriving on that strict forage diet. Okay, so just a little bit more of Bailey's data here. She's actually going to defend her thesis tomorrow, so I hope she's watching today and you can give a shout out to Bailey. But the other thing we have identified here is that this idea of residual average daily gain, and I'm not going to have time to go into this anymore, and we can talk at some point in the future more about it, but residual average daily gain in Bailey's data set and Bailey and Emma Briggs's data combined, we've got, I forget now, 270 or so females in this data set at this point. But the idea of residual average daily gain, I think, appears to be working really well for a forage efficiency metric if you want an index like this, to use an index like this. But here you see Bailey and Emma's heifers for dry matter intake that were ranked as efficient at 14.7 pounds, and those inefficient heifers exactly the same at 14.7 pounds. A little bit higher intake in those moderate heifers in this data set. But notice the difference here in average daily gain. Consuming the same amount of forage, but over 0.6 of a pound difference in weight gain, consuming nothing but straight hay and mineral. Now, to me, that is impressive. And I think Bailey's got other data that indicates at this point in time, at least out to 4 years of age, right now we'd have to say there's no difference in their body weight as 4-year-old cows. Now, we'll continue to grow that data set over time here as we go along. But right now, it looks like selecting cattle for residual average daily gain on a strict forage diet, where really their gain is very limited, right down around a pound a day average, we are not getting increased mature body weight or increased cow weight. Now, if we were to be doing that on a high quality diet with heifers gaining 2.5 pounds a day or something like that, I think residual average daily gain would be leading you to selecting for larger and larger cows. But that's not what's happening when we're testing these cattle on a hay diet. Okay, so this is a set of cows. This is some of Sam Talley's data. And Sam tested both gestating and lactating cows. Kaylin Stearns is doing some of this work right now. And some of our early data suggests that we're finding tremendous differences in forage efficiency in these different contemporary groups of beef cows. This is Sam's gestation performance in those cows. You can see the numbers under each one of those efficiency classifications there, and just an incredible difference in forage intake. 25 pounds in the efficient group, up to 33 pounds. So over 8 pounds a day, almost 9 pounds a day difference in those two sets of females, gaining the same, basically in the same body condition. So 28% difference. This is why I say we have a lot of opportunity to improve these characteristics in our cattle throughout our country. The other neat thing I want to share with you here is that in each one of these groups of cows so far, we have been able to calculate their maintenance energy requirements. Don't worry about the units over there on the left. That's really confusing. All I want you to do is see these numbers of this is maintenance energy for metabolizable energy is the unit we're using here. But 179 megacalories or kilocalories in this case in the efficient heifers and 236 in the inefficient during lactation. I said heifers, I meant cows. 151 kcals of metabolizable energy during gestation, up to 224. So there's something to this idea. Now, this is residual feed intake. Earlier, I was talking about efficiency classified by RADG. I shouldn't confuse you. These are ranked by residual feed intake, but there's definitely something to this idea that animals that have more efficient RFI, meaning lower RFI, appear to have lower maintenance requirements, and we are seeing that consistently. 23% in this experiment, substantially lower. And remember, maintenance energy is 50% of the total energy utilization to produce a pound of beef. So that's a neat deal. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. I hope you all will be maybe typing any questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll take some time here to take some questions. Maybe looks like we've got plenty of time left. So first of all, I want to say again, what can you do that's practical if you want to make certain that even the heifers that you are retaining, whether you're a seed stock or a commercial operation, what can you do? Well, it's pretty simple, I think. If you could find a time that's convenient for you to weigh those females that you retain, or again, you may want to retain more than you think you're going to need, but weigh those heifers, turn them out on moderate to lower quality forage. And why do I say moderate? Well, the higher quality diet you provide to them, and you'd hope to be able to turn them out in a situation where you didn't need to supplement very much. Because the more you have to supplement or the higher the quality of the forage, the more you muddy the water. in my opinion. Now, I think any grass gain is going to be better than not doing anything at all. But in a spring calving operation, it would make sense to me to do this little test, after the heifers have stopped balling and you've got them straightened out and healthy and you can turn them out. You could conduct one of these 70 to 100-day tests just in a dry lot consuming straight hay. That would work as well. But just weigh the females early in the morning before you turn them out on whatever forage you're going to utilize, and weigh them again in 70 to 100 days. The Beef Improvement Federation thinks we need at least about 70 days to do a good job of estimating average daily gain. And so that's why we say 70 to 100 days. And then if you do that, you're going to find a wide spread in that average daily gain. And you will be able to rank those heifers for their ability to gain weight as a growing animal. And so far, the data that's in the literature indicates that the genetic correlation for weight gain in a heifer relates very well. It's a moderate to high genetic correlation to a mature cow. And so we think that should lead to females that are better able to thrive in a moderate quality forage environment year round and maintain or even gain body condition without an extreme amount or without a lot of supplementation. Now, some people who have a really strict program, a heifer development program, where you're already kind of maybe restricting the heifer development to 60% of their expected mature body weight by the first day of the breeding season, or even some people in the industry now are even pushing that down to around 55% development weight on the first day of the breeding season, and then maybe um, um, exposing those heifers for only 30 to 45 days, you know what? You're probably already achieving that number one bullet point up there, because if you only keep the heifers that get bred in a short breeding season and they have been challenged, in other words, not fed a lot of concentrate to gain 2.5 pounds a day, you're probably already making progress. In a program like what I'm trying to describe. And so I think that's good. That just might not be intentional, or maybe that's not what you had a goal set out for when you began that program. But challenging cattle to be fertile in a restricted diet in a restricted environment is probably going to make progress. Also use sires with moderate mature cow weight EPD, a dry matter intake EPD. We talked about that. I think the way to go about the appetite side of forage efficiency and cow costs is to use the genetic tools we have available, and we discussed that. I won't go into the milk EPD thing, but with obviously a moderate milk EPD and whatever breed you are dealing with is probably a wise idea. We can still, it's very apparent that we can still get too carried away with milk and sacrifice that ability to maintain condition under more difficult environmental conditions. Okay, and then finally consider purchasing herd sires from breeders that are reporting their cow weights and testing for feed intake. The only, or not the only, but the big advantage there is that those breeders' EPDs will be backed up by those phenotypes that are being recorded and turned into the breed association, and therefore the accuracy of those genetic values will increase more rapidly. And so that's an advantage to anyone that has a high breeding objective to achieve that. Okay, so Dr. Biggs, Dr. Beck, I would be happy to visit about any questions that we have.
Thank you, Dave. That's a great summary of a lot of work that you put in. I have a quick question. Is there a just visual type that you're seeing for either heifers or these cows that are considered forage efficient? Are they moderate frame, thicker, thick through the middle? What kind of visually, how do these heifers look or cows look, or is there a type?
Well, it's yes and no. That's a good question, and actually, I wind up getting that question quite a bit. But so it depends on which one of those indexes you want to use. So the residual average daily gain idea, and again, I'm applying that to a strict forage diet. Okay, I would not be, as you can tell, I would not be for selecting cattle for residual average daily gain if your breeding objective is to control cow costs, because I think your cow costs will go up if you're using a high quality diet to estimate residual or calculate residual average daily gain. But with a forage diet, residual average daily gain, absolutely you can see the difference, right? Because those cattle are gaining, those heifers are they're eating the same, but they're gaining substantially more, 0.6 a pound a day between the inefficient and the efficient heifers so far in our data set. Absolutely, you can see the difference, and they are much easier to look at. The efficient RADG heifers on forage are much easier to look at than those inefficient heifers. Bailey's got a really nice data set. I'm excited for her to defend her thesis tomorrow, but we don't have a significant difference in pregnancy rate or timed AI pregnancy rate yet, but the overall pregnancy rate definitely leans in the direction of those RADG efficient heifers having higher pregnancy rate. It is not significant at this point, but we'll continue to grow that. RFA, Dr. Beck, I had a really nice slide I was going to include here today, and I forgot to grab it. But the problem with efficient RFI females on a forage diet is we get quite a few heifers down there, that rank as efficient for RFI that don't gain very much. In fact, I think Bailey's got a graph that shows a couple of heifers that are losing weight and ranked as efficient for residual feed intake. Now, does that make you scratch your head a little bit? Yeah. And so, but we have quite a few heifers, quite a few females that gain below about, I'm just going to say below about 0.4 of a pound a day, and rank as efficient for RFI. Yeah, I'm looking for that graph and I don't see it here. So, and then also Bailey's data on these heifers suggests that, again, we do not yet have a significant difference, but it leans heavy in the direction of RF efficient RFI females. They're not doing very well. So we'll see how that turns out here in another couple of years when we have a lot more data. But yeah, you can kind of see that as well. On the cows, I would say no. It's really tough to see differences on the cows.
Thank you. We got a few questions from some of our mainstays that always have questions, and that's always happy
Good.
to see.
Excellent.
Brian Frecking from Southeastern Oklahoma. Clarification, does the OSU calculator nutrition spreadsheet contain the Megan Gross intake equation or the new one?
No, it does not. That software program is completely based on the National Academy of Sciences equations and publications. Next time the National Academy decides to update that publication, will make sure that they're aware of that equation, and hope maybe they'll consider using it.
Let's see. Did I lose a question? There's a question, another question from Brian. Any thoughts on how environmental adaptability, such as hair shedding, et cetera, may correlate to more efficient cows, if any, in those RFI studies?
So I think Brian must be, when he says efficient, he must be thinking about forage efficiency or energetic efficiency. Because the fertility piece obviously could come in there and kind of muddy the water maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Possibly. It would be interesting to consider that, Brian, from that hair shedding. I think I hear the geneticists talk about that hair shedding as an indication of adaptability. And obviously, cows that shed early are much favored in terms of their adaptability. And so it might be that cows that do not shed well are kind of restricting their forage intake because they're not willing to get out there and graze in the heat of the day. I don't know. It's a good question.
Doug Galloway, a good friend of ours from actually Eastern Oklahoma, but he's also employed at University of Arkansas. Can you put back up the cow hay efficiency intake slide with that small box where it's summarized showing 28% less hay for efficient cows? I think it was the third from last slide.
I can do that. Okay. Is that, do I have the right one up there?
Yeah, I think so.
What, Doug, do you have, what is your question? Maybe he's taking notes. Good opportunity, Dr. Biggs, for you to tell everybody where to find these videos.
Absolutely. Just for those, if you're wanting to check this data out maybe a little bit closer than we were able to do today, certainly take a look at our archived webinars, and those are found on our Beef Extension website. In just a second, I'll put that in the chat if you'd like. Also want to highlight a couple of events that you may want to take advantage of. We've got Cow-Calf Boot Camp coming up in Ada, April 20th and 22nd. I'll put that registration link there in the chat too, if that's of interest to you. So I'll let you take it back from here, Dr. Beck.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Biggs. One thing I keep seeing, that those moderate cows don't eat a whole lot more than the efficient, but that RFI is sure a lot different between the moderate and the highly efficient for sure. Dave Siebert is asking, where does the dollar energy for Angus fit into this area?
Good question. As near as I can tell, dollar EN is primarily driven by mature cow weight. There's supposed to also be some influence of milk in that dollar EN estimate. But from what I can tell, it is primarily driven by mature cow weight. So our discussion about, the relationship of mature cow weight and feed intake, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 pounds per 100 pounds of cow weight would apply in terms of, feed savings. Dollar EN is supposed to be annual feed savings. Good question.
Dr. Flint Harrelson from Batesville, Arkansas. He has both a fall and a spring calf and cow herd, is asking, do you think any of these heifer efficiency measures change in a fall calving versus a spring calving herd?
I don't think so. We don't have data to say for sure whether, the environment would impact their ranking for efficiency. But, my anticipation would be that if an animal, if we can find a genetic correlation here, once we get maybe a few hundred more phenotypes collected, you would expect that genetic value to persist, whether it's in a spring calving or a fall calving program. So I think a forage efficient female is going to be a forage efficient female, regardless of when she calves.
We've got one last question. Jared says, in the intake studies, and I love this question because it gets into some of the process of the amount of work that it takes to do these studies. How is hay waste figured in? Casual observation shows particular cows are always trying to get to the middle of the bale or dragging out a lot of hay to sort through. Now they use bunks for grow safe, but there's still a waste component.
Well, I wish my grad students were on here with me. They could give you a good lecture on that question. It's a good one, and it's an important one to consider. I'm gonna roll back up here to my if I can find my little video, and we'll just talk about it. Okay, so good question. You notice there's some hay laying around on the ground here, right? And there's some hanging out of the feeder a little bit through these baskets. And so what we do is, and you see this hay back over here on the ground, and there's a little bit of hay in between those two alleys that lead up to the feeders. What we do is on time intervals, and it kind of depends on the hay. The lower the quality hay and the more trash in the hay, you can't believe what we found in some of these feeders. I'll try not to get too carried away here, Dr. Biggs, but leather boots, parts of saddles, sticks, rocks, you name it. We found that we're apparently baled up in the hay, but the lower quality of the hay, the more frequently we have to clean these feeders. Okay, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this little piece right here, this angled piece of this feeder is a hinged gate, and that drops down, and we pull what's left in that feeder out here into the alley. We come out here with rakes and we clean everything up, and we make a big pile here, and then we put the front end bucket back on the tractor, and we pick it up and we put it in a vertical mixer with a digital scale. Okay, and so we weigh what we call the orts, that is the hay left in the feeder the day we clean out, and the waste outside in a vertical scale, and we weigh it. All right. And then we grind it up in that vertical mixer. We subsample it, and we take that to the laboratory. We dry it. We determine the moisture content. Um, and then I should also mention, before any bale of hay is fed, it is weighed. Okay, so we know the weight of the hay that goes into the feed intake system. We know the weight of the orts that we clean out and the waste that's on the ground, and we can calculate the difference between what the system says disappeared, right? If we get on the website and we download all the data, what the system thinks disappeared versus what we measure disappeared. And so we want that difference to be less than 5%. And so far, we've gotten better and better. And most of the time now, the difference between those two measures is less than 5%. It's a lot of work. So the better the quality hay, though, the less we have to clean out. You can tell this is nice quality Bermuda grass hay, and we can go for a month nearly if we don't get a big rain and not have to clean out, because there's just not a lot of low quality hay left in the bottom of the feeder every morning when the grad student goes out there to feed. Excellent question. Thank you. I've never actually got to describe that before on one of these presentations. Anything else?
Yeah, Robbie Pritchard. Glad to
Oh,
have
Dr.
him on.
Pritchard, welcome.
We may assume that the population distributions of DMI and efficiency apply across a range of cow mature body weights.
Was that a question?
I put a question at the end, so.
Okay, say it again, please.
Do we assume that the population distributions of dry matter intake and efficiency apply across a range of cow mature body weights?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wish I had the slide here close to hand to share with you, but I can describe you what we see. So every contemporary group we test, Dr. Pritchard, we find cows that consume 40 up, maybe up to 45 pounds of hay a day. This would be during the lactation period. And we find cows that consume maybe 25 pounds of hay a day. So a wide range. We have, Sam showed a slide last year where he's got one cow that is consuming 40 pounds of hay a day. It might have been 42 pounds of hay. She's giving about 8 or 9 pounds of milk a day, and she's losing weight throughout the 70-day experiment. Doesn't get much worse than that, right? He has another cow that is consuming about 25 pounds of hay a day. She's given about 22, maybe 25 pounds of milk, something like that, quite a bit. And she's gaining weight. Okay, so, and these are two cows that are very similar in mature body weight. And so it doesn't get hardly any better than that, right? Think about a cow producing that much milk, consuming nothing but hay and mineral, grass, hay, and mineral, and gaining weight. That is amazing. And only consuming about 25 pounds of forage. That cow is a rock star. And so we see tremendous differences with cows that weigh about the same. Absolutely. And that's another reason why I'm really excited about this work, because we are finding some really good cows and what we refer to in our lab as some wonderfully terrible cows too.
You have to have those terrible cows to really have a really good example.
That makes it a lot of fun.
That is all the discussion I am seeing. Doug Galloway did follow up and say we have seen the same in selecting for more efficient heifers. More cow days per bale of hay is really a big deal.
Interesting. Okay, good way to put it. Well, I hope you all come back next week. You're really going to enjoy Dr. Beck's presentation, the cool stuff he's put together.
So thank you all, and we will close it out from here. Thank you all. Have a great day.